Hi there, I'm Ben Ducharme, VP of Insights and Strategy at Langston. Today, we're going to be walking through an apparel basics category deep dive that is entirely built from data from our Landscapes Insights ecosystem. Landscapes is an incredible tool and for an insights director to have in their toolkit because Langston's already gone out and fielded rich, rigorous studies in a variety of categories. In this case, we fielded it in apparel. So we've have thousands of consumer data points on apparel basics, including underwear and socks and base layers, as well as other categories like outerwear and insulated jackets and fleece, etc. We take a really rigorous approach and go capture a wide variety of data on brand, category engagement, shopper behavior, included a segmentation layer that we'll look through today as well. So we have rich, broad, and deep insights on tap ready to go. What that means is when you have business questions that you want to dig into data around or have a partner develop a strategic story around, we can kick it off and turn it around to you incredibly quickly. Today in the world, you are pressured with more questions than you can answer, and you're faced with a variety of tools to help do that. A custom deep research study, while incredible, can be time intensive and resource intensive, both in terms of the amount of time you have to spend engaging in it and finding the right vendor, developing the study and actually fielding it, etc., as well as the cost to actually go scope and field a custom research effort. Landscapes ensures you still get rigorous, rich, incredible consumer data. You don't have to cut any corners there, but you get it quickly and you get it at a lower cost than a custom study would be. So we start the project here where we kick off on a meeting, we understand your core business questions, and then we provide you access to the data from the jump. Should you be interested in partnership and developing a strategic story, hey, we want to know how our brand is positioned relative to competitors, etc. We actually dig into the data and can help build a story like the one we're about to walk through for you from scratch, custom built for your brand and you personally. There's a lot of reasons to do it. As I mentioned, you get instant access to this rich data set. You get that strategic partnership when you need it. We have built-in segmentations we'll showcase, and we're here as partners for you along the journey to help make meaning out of the data. We love research. We love uncovering insights. We love bringing them to life. And so we're here for you. We're an extension of your team. All right, let's dig in. We commissioned this study. So while we be focusing on a variety of brands, including brands like Hanes, this is Langston commission, and therefore we recommend you interpret the insights accordingly. All right. While digging into the data, one key dynamic we uncovered is that Hanes is an incredibly established apparel basics brand. It's ubiquitous in the category, but there are clear headwinds that the brand is facing. We predict the brand is feeling very squeezed right now between up and coming challengers who are upmarket, premium brands that are disrupting the space and pushing prices up, as well as the pressure from private label brands that are squeezing by beating on lower price points. Hanes is in a highly competitive moment right now. We're going to walk through 5 core questions in this report. How is Hanes performing in the crowded market? What are competitive threats should be on Hanes' radar, and how can the brand action against them? Where can Hanes innovate to solve unmet consumer needs? How can it position itself to win on shoppers' purchase journey? And then last, how can Hanes be thinking about targeting and activating different consumer segments to maximize their market share? And there is some very specific feedback and thought starters we have for the brand around how to do that today. We'll move through this and actually move on to the data itself, but we've rolled up these insights into 5 key takeaways. So I won't go through them right now because we're going to dig into the data, but in short, there are very clear, specific answers to each of those questions that we recommend Hanes takes. All right, question 1. How is Hanes performing in a crowded apparel basics market? Broadly speaking, Hanes, Fruit of the Loom, Calvin Klein, and others are ubiquitous. Universal awareness, 96% aided awareness for Hanes as a brand. When we go down the funnel from awareness to familiarity, there retains a very high level of familiarity. You can see for Calvin Klein, for example, there's a slightly larger drop off there. You see that much more dramatically for smaller players like MeUndies, 40% conversion from aware to familiar. That indicates that there's an I heard of it phenomena going on for those up and coming brands. Consumers may have heard of MeUndies, maybe they heard about them on a podcast or while scrolling social media, but they don't really have a strong relationship with the brand. They don't know exactly all about the products it makes and what makes it tick and how high quality is it, etc. Hanes, though, has that really strong familiarity, as does Fruit of the Loom. When we move through the funnel, we see that the brand has incredibly strong conversion metrics. 90% of familiar consumers would consider the brand, for example. That's incredibly strong. We do consumer research in a variety of categories, from apparel to footwear to skincare and beauty to tech and platforms. And let me tell you, that consideration conversion number is incredibly strong. You can see for other competitors that declines and drops off. So, smaller up and coming brands in this space have a tendency to have lower consideration relative to the big ubiquitous players. That's not shocking. And the immediate follow up question that you should be asking is, yeah, but which consumers are considering these brands? And it's the right question. For a brand like Hanes, it's competing for the general population. It's competing for that middle 80% of the bell curve of consumers in a shape. For some of the other competitors, especially for up and coming brands trying to carve out a niche of consumers to resonate with, they should be and have been highly focused on one or a few subsets or a few audience segments. When we cut the data by life lenses, which is Langston's universal segmentation approach that we apply to all landscape studies, they're built upon underlying goals and motivations as people, agnostic of the category, and then we include that typing tool in each study. So we get to see how a segment like a cultural canary, cultural canaries are trend forward, they're always on the cutting edge, they pay attention to up and coming brands, up and coming themes, they want to be socially connected and in the know about what's next. That really resonates with who they are and their underlying goals as humans. So even in a space like apparel basics, they're focused on what's next, what are innovations, what are styles and trends and fashions that are going to be bold, that help me show out, that showcase who I am and that I am someone who is that bellwether for my friends and community for the next thing that's coming in any given space, including apparel basics. Okay, so we cut the data by segments. What we're looking for here is, does the brand strongly resonate with one or more consumer segments and then not resonate with others? We picked these 7 of the 24 life lenses because we think they give a good cross-section of some variety of different mindsets in the space. What we see is that cultural canary and image architects, to high-spending, style-forward segments, have slightly lower aided or absolute funnel metrics for Hanes. So for example, 85% familiarity, 76% consideration. And if you contrast that with somebody like the practical minimalist or the stability seeker or the tradition keeper, for example, you can see that in absolute sense, familiarity is near universal for those segments, consideration is higher for those segments, etc. But with that said, the absolute metrics, even for these high spending, trend forward, style forward segments like our canaries and our image architects, they still are highly likely to consider Hanes. And that's a key point. The brand has permission to go win with these consumers. 3 out of 4 of them say, yeah, I'd buy from Hanes. I would buy underwear, socks, etc. from the brand. That is telling us that the brand can and should be attracting and retaining those consumers as part of their customer base. Just like they should also be appealing to the stability seeker, the tradition keeper, the practical minimalist, for example. As a large established player, they actually have a mandate to do so. They can't just focus on 20% of consumers. They need to sell to the wide diversity of shoppers who are going to be aligning with their size and scale and their very established distribution presence. So key takeaway here is the brand is resonating across consumer segments. It has high permission to play with a variety of segments. However, it does skew more towards our more functional-minded consumers, our minimalists, our stability seeker, our tradition keeper, and slightly less performing with our trend forward style focus segments. Not shocking, but it's good to see the data validates that dynamic for a brand like Hanes. Okay, with that being said, when we look in an absolute sense across all brands, 25 underwear brands in this case that we included in this landscape study, and the 24 life lenses, we see Hanes rises to the top for almost all of them. It lands second for the image architects, our faithful Pathfinder, and our cultural canary, but it is number 1 in terms of absolute consideration for every other group. You'll see Fruit of the Loom and Calvin Klein pop here as well. In short, what this means is the well-known brands in the apparel basics space are doing incredibly well in absolute consideration. Broadly speaking, across mindsets, which have skews in terms of demographics and psychographics, across that, these brands are popping and rising to the top. Once again, This means Hanes has permission to go after and win with all of these segments. We'll come back to that when we talk about product portfolio later and talk about how the brand has an opportunity to better target and win with some of these segments specifically. When it comes to conversion, so moving consumers from one stage of the funnel to the next, Hanes is the top of the list in terms of familiarity conversion and consideration conversion, Whereas when you look at consideration to ever purchased, you'll see Hanes lands right about 100%, just over with 103%. What that means is slightly more consumers have purchased from the brand than would consider purchasing in the future. In fact, a number too far above 100%, usually we recommend that threshold is around 110%, indicates attrition. So for a brand like Pact or Icebreaker, two smaller known brands, but who have gained steam in the past number of years, you'll see that there's attrition concerns here. Consumers have purchased but may not consider buying from the brand again in the future, which is a signal that they may be dropping off or they're one and done. Yeah, I bought from them, but maybe didn't have a great product experience, or maybe it was too expensive or not right for me. Whatever the underlying barrier there it is, this is a key signal we see in funnel metrics to point to and say, hey, watch out. If you're a brand leader at one of these brands, watch out. There's some semblance of dissatisfaction among consumers. Hanes is just north of 103, at 103. That's an indication that it may be trending in that direction. It's worth monitoring. But given the brand size and date, it would make sense that some consumers have purchased from it maybe years ago and may not be on the brand's radar today. Other brands, up-and-coming brands like Skims, for example, fall to the bottom of this list, meaning only 1 out of 2 considerers have ever purchased from Skims. Skims has latent conversion to build that is built up over time, and Skims has an opportunity to actually better convert those consumers, either through telling a clear, more personalized story, resonating with them, or improving distribution so that the brand can actually be accessible where consumers shop. Let's dig in a layer deeper here. Once again, we're going to come back to segments. The reason why we're going to come back to segments here is you can imagine a brand like Skims, which is purpose built around select consumer mindsets. It is very much so focused on a fashion and trend forward consumer group who has an aesthetic, who has a mindset and worldview, and they have hyper targeted that consumer group. They have built for them, they have marketed to them, they've communicated to them, and they've done effective at growing the brand through that strategy. That is the way you grow an up and coming brand, is have a very clear target audience and build for them and go win with them. However, when we look at a key metric like familiarity to consideration conversion, so the percent of familiar consumers who would actually consider buying from the brand, it's incredibly powerful to show the power of Hanes's legacy status. Culture Canaries, for example, a segment that we saw, has slightly worse absolute metrics with Hanes. Culture Canaries, 90% of them who are familiar with Hanes would consider buying from the brand. Compare that in an absolute sense to Skims, where 68% of Culture Canaries who's familiar with the brand would consider buying from the brand. So Hanes, despite its legacy status, that it's building products for all consumers, it is still really well serving this consumer audience that Skim and others have hyper attempted to focus on and win with. That means 2 things. 1, those consumers are open to buying with Hanes. But 2, your competitors are actively trying to steal market share from you, and they're going after these groups. When we talk about playing offense or even defense, Hanes needs to be very mindful of this dynamic, ensuring that its product portfolio and pricing strategy are keeping those consumers in their fold so that they're not sprinting away to other brands when they come available. Culture Canaries are open to buying from Hanes, but Hanes needs to make sure that it has the right products, it has the right designs and styles for that audience. Otherwise, they will continue moving to other up-and-coming brands. Okay, key point 1, say it again, I've said it a few times. Hanes is a market leader. It is ubiquitous. It is strongly positioned. There's high levels of consideration across the board, but there's an opportunity to better serve segments' needs, which we're going to actually dive into in the next few slides. Okay, competitive threats. We look at brand associations to help identify the mental model that consumers have for brands in a given space. We look at absolute associations for each brand here, and we've just picked some select brands to focus in on. We can contrast those associations for each brand against the brand average to help highlight areas where it over or under indexes. Hanes, for example, pops in terms of being associated with being comfortable, durable, a brand of trust, a good value, providing good support, and a brand for me. That's really positive attributes. It shows a lot of functional considerations. Comfort, durability are key purchase considerations, so that the fact that the brand is associated with those is a strong positioning. That is how the brand has grown. It is seen as comfortable. It is seen as being a good value. It is giving you what you want for a price that feels worth it. Let's contrast that with some others. We can see a brand like Calvin Klein, for example, over-indexing on being high quality, stylish and trendy, also sexy and luxurious. Victoria's Secret takes the cake on sexy, which is not shocking. It pops dramatically relative to other competitors here, which of course is a core attribute that the brand has built with in terms of its products, its positioning, who its target audience is, etc., over decades. Let's take Smartwool as another example here, which is worth interesting. Smartwool and Calvin Klein both are associated with high quality, but Smartwool also pops on something like durable, for example, as well as sustainable and innovative. So even though Calvin Klein and Smartwool are seen as high quality by consumers, what quality means can mean different things. So Smartwool is more associated with a mindset related to its legacy in the outdoor space. It's durable, it's long lasting, it's sustainable, it's going to hold up to the rigors here. Whereas Calvin Klein is more associated with its legacy around being a stylish brand, a trendy brand, a fashion forward brand. Contrasting brands head to head can really help highlight areas of parity or differentiation. We love this visualization to help show this. We've just plotted those associations for Hanes against Calvin Klein to call out the zone of differentiation for each. What we can see is Hanes relative to Calvin Klein owns a few associations clearly. It owns comfort, it owns durability, trust, brand for me, value, and somewhat is owning that support. And this aligns dramatically with what Hanes has leaned into in terms of product development and marketing. The brand has leaned heavily on comfort, for example. A comfort guarantee, make yourself comfortable as a hashtag for a campaign they recently ran. And that really helps align with that approach. While these are functional considerations, they're really critical table stakes within this space. And so the brand is saying, we are the best at these category table stakes. Calvin Klein, on the other hand, stands out for owning stylish, trendy, quality, sexy, and luxurious. And that helps showcase the skew there. So if I'm a consumer who I'm looking for something that is going to make me look good and feel confident in how I look, I may be pulled towards Calvin Klein. Whereas if I'm someone who's focused on, I just want to feel comfortable, nobody's going to see this, but I want to make sure it lasts, it provides good value, I can trust it to perform well, then I may be pulled towards Hanes. We index our brand associations to help showcase these quadrants or maps to help highlight mental models that consumers have. Hanes is quite literally off the chart for durable and long-lasting and comfort when indexed against other competitors, followed by Fruit of the Loom, whereas we see Victoria's Secret on the opposite end of the spectrum there. So durable and long-lasting, comfortable, it might not be, but sexy, absolutely it is. Okay, that's our competitive landscape. Now let's look one layer deeper into consumer needs and where there may be opportunities to innovate to better serve consumers' unmet needs. We plot consumer need prevalence, what percent of consumers in a space have an articulated or a felt need, against metness. To what extent are needs well served by existing brands and products today? This helps showcase these three zones. In the overserved zone, we have needs that tend to be lower prevalent, but high metness. Served right are needs that tend to be in the middle with somewhat higher prevalence and somewhat higher metness. And then underserved are brands that are very prevalent and low met. In fact, in this category, you see somewhat of a negative correlation here, where as prevalence increases, metness tends to be slightly lower, which shows there's innovation opportunities. Even in a category like apparel basics, which has a lot of players, a long legacy, it is not a new category. It would not be thought of immediately as a disruptive or innovative space, but it is ripe for a brand or brands to come along and say, how do we better serve these needs today? It's the reason why so many brands lead into cooling technology. Staying comfortable in any temperature is a key need. Highly prevalent, very common, but not well served today. Consumers have frustrations or there's room for improvement when it comes to feeling comfortable in your body, in your skin, in any temperature with the apparel basics that you're wearing. Feeling confident in my appearance and moving freely without restriction are the top three that all fall into that underserved quadrant. Now, we recommend that brands who are very large focus on high prevalence, low served needs. Why? Because they have permission to play across consumer groups. They should have an innovation pipeline that's making sure they're staying on the cutting edge and staying appealing and attractive to a broader audience. If you're an up and coming brand, though, you have to justify consumers switching from existing legacy players to your brand. One way to do that is actually focusing on more niche needs. So expressing my unique sense of style, we imagine a brand like MeUndies really focused on as it developed. It is leaning into colorful, bold patterns, things that make you laugh, things that you can wear with your partner, very much so focused on style and uniqueness, being different from the rest of the competitors, the legacy players that exist. That's great for building and establishing an early adopter base, an engaged, loyal fan base. But when scaling and growing, the brands then need to ladder up to these higher order, more ubiquitous needs. So if you're building a brand from scratch, you should identify what are the category table stakes that we have to win on long term to be successful in this space. We have to build for those, but we differentiate ourselves by serving more niche needs. So in the case of MeUndies, we need to make very comfortable, good fabric feel, high quality underwear, but we're going to differentiate and win on unique sense of style. Okay. When we look at brand alignment, so how well brands are serving consumer needs and how that correlates to key metrics, in this case, brand advocacy, giving a 9 or 10 out of would you recommend this brand to friends, family, etc. What we see here is a strong positive correlation between brands that meet select needs and advocacy. So brands that serve feeling confident in my appearance tend to be high likely to have strong advocacy metrics, as do brands that serve stay cozy while relaxing. These are the top two needs that correlate with this metric. We can see, for example, Hanes really pops, as does Fruit of the Loom, on strong alignment with staying cozy while relaxing. That goes back to the associations with being comfortable. And those brands have strong brand advocacy. I would recommend them to friends and family. However, when we look at feel confident in my appearance, Victoria's Secret pops here, the highest alignment with serving that need and pretty strong brand advocacy as well. Hanes, while has strong brand advocacy and somewhat strong feeling confident in appearance, actually fits underneath the trend line there. So there is room for improvement in connecting the dots between Hanes products, how they feel, and what they enable in terms of underlying needs. So are they enabling you to actually feel confident in how you look? That goes back to the underlying needs and associations of feeling stylish, feeling fashionable, not just comfortable, durable, I trust it, it's a good value, etc. Essentially, laddering up those same features to some more social, emotional benefits rather than just the functional considerations. Okay, fourth key question, how can Hanes position itself to win during the shopping journey? When we look at our category engagement module, we see very specific action items when it comes to how are consumers shopping within a space. What's triggering purchases in both underwear and socks are needed replacements. This makes sense. Consumers already own a wide variety of underwear and socks, I hope. So when I'm going to purchase them, 2 out of 3 consumers are buying underwear because they need a replacement, followed by it was on sale and discounted, or I needed extra. You see a long tail here of other triggers, and we see things like I wanted to upgrade my wardrobe, my partner told me to do it, I saw an advertisement, etc. Now, while some of these triggers can actually make you realize you needed a replacement so they can connect to each other, what this shows is that consumers are likely to say, oh, I need new here in the space, so I'm going to replenish. And in that moment, whether shopping in store or online, consumers are going to be looking for the right brand with the right product to meet their needs in that moment. When it comes to discovering new brands, trends, products, in-store leads notably. That followed by online retailer websites. So the power of distribution is already apparent. Consumers both shop in person and online in this category, of course, and this represents where they're discovering brands. So if you're introducing a new product lineup, leaning into those displays and your distribution partners to actually highlight and showcase that is really important. Now, when you do a sell-in story with those retailers, you're going to have to justify that. And that's where consumer insights data can be incredibly helpful. We can help actually package for you a specific story for a specific retailer or distribution partner to say, hey, here's a new product line, or here's what we're leading with, and here's why. And this is your buyer, your shopper, Walmart or Target, etc. And here's why this is going to resonate with them and why we think you should prioritize it in terms of an end cap display, for example. When it comes to social media, consumers, about 17% say they're seeing them either in brand pages or advertisements or through influencers. And the vast majority of those impressions are coming from Instagram, TikTok, and Facebook. Shockingly, but that rises to the top in terms of where consumers are discovering that. I will say this category definitely skews towards discovery during the shopping moment. So that would be in-store displays and online websites. So while I'm looking for a replacement, for example, I might come across a new brand, a new product, a new technology, etc., as opposed to I'm picking it up passively because I'm a lover of the space. In other categories, take cycling, for example, or anything else that consumers have high levels of engagement and interest in, you can see higher rates of active research and that being the pathway to discovery. If I love cycling, for example, I'm going to be engaged maybe in Instagram, in scrolling through accounts that I follow that are all about the cycling world. I may be more likely to watch YouTube videos related to it. I may be more likely to go and actually read reviews proactively because I'm kind of always shopping or always paying attention for what's next. Not the case in apparel basics. In terms of where consumers are shopping and where they would prefer to shop, just over 1 in 2 consumers would prefer to buy in person, both for underwear, socks, and the other apparel basics categories we have on hand. While some prefer to buy online and some have no prevalence, the key takeaway here is really important to have an omni-channel presence. Why? Because consumers are shopping in both spaces, but they are skewing towards shopping in person. So having a brick and mortar presence is really positive. What's the reason for that? Well, this clearly can connect back to being comfortable and soft as a core consideration factor for consumers when shopping. So physically being able to touch the product, feel, does that look right? Is that going to fit my body? Is this what I really want to buy? Is really critical for shoppers. And therefore, makes sense that the willingness to buy in person is the opportunity. There is a massive undertapped or underutilized opportunity in apparel, broadly speaking, but it also shows up here in apparel basics. Brands that can successfully show consumers what a product is going to fit and feel like in an online environment are going to reduce barriers to conversion and actually spark better conversion. We see this from innovations like TrueFit, which some brands in this space actually have on their product pages to help a customer determine the right size. They can input previous sizing preferences, for example, and then you get to see what they recommend. That way of matching what I know about my sizing against the brand's products helps increase my confidence that the fit is going to be right. Brands like Lululemon are leveraging these today. Once again, the purpose there is to help lower barriers to conversion and drive a sale in a moment when I'm wondering, is this going to fit me well? Is this going to feel good? Fabric feel on that point is more tricky. But there still is an opportunity in a digital environment to show what a fabric is going to feel like. What's the texture going to be like on my skin? Is this going to be breathable and airy? Is this going to be moisture wicking? Is this going to feel warm and cozy? How do we articulate that feel is really critical. It's more than a picture. And brands have innovated in this way through iconography, for example, through actually having the fabric in motion to help showcase what it's going to look like in a live environment. Very interesting to see opportunities here around brands that get this right, because that's going to actually help motivate consumers to purchase online so that they can skip a trip to the store and they're going to convert with you instead of shopping around for other. Okay, where are consumers actually shopping? Not shocking in apparel basics, but big box retailers, Target, Walmart, etc., rise to the top, followed by Amazon. We drill down on specific retailers as well in landscape, so we have data on a massive number of specific retailers here. So in our follow-up question, which big box retailers? Absolutely. Walmart rises to the top, Amazon, Target, etc. And then we have a long tail of competitors. Victoria's Secret shows up, of course, as both a brand and a retailer in this category. It's also worth noting here that direct from brand websites accounts for roughly 14% of consumer shopping engagement. That shows us that D2C brands get tapped out when they get to a certain scale. So it's great to be a D2C brand when you're young and growing, and then you hit your distribution challenge. You've tapped out your audience of early adopters, of more digitally focused consumers, once again, if only 19% of underwear shoppers prefer to buy online and 14% of them are buying from brand websites, there's only incremental growth through an online only strategy. You have to get a physical in-person presence, and that's when you need retailer partners. Once again, that's a place Landscape helps brands all the time, and actually working through those sell-in stories and actually packaging why their brand resonates with the target audience that retailer is attempting to bring in the doors. I already hinted at this, so we'll move through this quickly in terms of overall consideration factors. What are you thinking about at the point of purchase or asking yourself? Number one, is this comfortable and soft? Second, is it worth the price? Three, is it available in the size or color I want? Makes sense. Very functional considerations are top of mind for many consumers. When we look further down the list, though, and on the next slide, we'll see this when it comes to category specific or segment specific SKUs. Things like breathable and moisture wicking, quality of materials, brand, reviews and ratings, and then things like natural, organic, or non toxic materials. This is really interesting. And just to call this out, we often see this in consumer data. Hey, we hear sustainability or being environmentally friendly is really important to consumers, but it always falls to the bottom in a survey environment. A couple reasons for this. One, it is important to some consumers. 12% of consumers selected it, and that gets higher when we look at specific segments, so hold that. Second, while it is on the second or third tier of consideration, things like, does it look good? And is it made from these natural materials? Are actually proxies for something else. And we see this when we run regressions against data like this, which is a brand that takes the time to invest in sustainable materials, in designing something aesthetically pleasing. They're investing in their product, which tells me as a shopper that it is more likely to be high quality from high quality materials, and things like last longer, feel more comfortable, etc. So actually, some of these lower order things like design, sustainability, even some others in other categories are actually seen as hidden drivers of perceptions around quality. If a brand takes the time to invest in building a great product, in the materials they're sourcing and the relationship they have with their manufacturers, for example, that tells me as a consumer that they really care. They really give a damn. And therefore, I'm more likely to trust it being a high quality product and delivering on what they say they will. Really important dynamic we've uncovered in many, many categories. When it comes to segment differences, we're going to contrast two against each other. So on the right here, we have questions while shopping that are more common among innovators who are technology focused, cutting edge, always want to be in the know, and they're willing to spend more in categories, including apparel basics. On the left, we have considerations more common among practical minimalists. As their name would suggest, more focused on simplicity, functionality, no nonsense, no fuss is more resonant with these consumers. So practical minimalists are more likely to ask themselves questions like size and color availability, comfort and soft, durability. Those same functional features are even more top of mind for that segment. For innovators, on the other hand, high quality materials, natural, organic, non-toxic, brand, values alignment, style focus are more common among that group. That helps showcase really important segment SKUs. And we can see if I'm building for the innovator, I got to be answering those questions in a way that if I'm building for the practical minimalist, I don't need to answer those on front of package. Maybe I can put them on back of package or have them on a reference page on our website, but it doesn't need to be what I'm leading with. Whereas if I'm building for an innovator, you bet I need to explain exactly why the high quality material is the best, how the technologies enable that, where I'm sourcing my materials and what they're made of. Are they organic cotton, for example? All right. We're going to move through these next slides pretty quickly. Frustrations that rise to the top. Number one, high price does not mean high quality. Second, uncertain if products will fit comfortably. That goes back to the point I made earlier around ensuring that in a digital environment, consumers can understand their fit. Measurements are hard. Consumers are not likely to go pick up a tape measure and actually measure themselves and see if it fits. So if I know I'm a size large from Hanes, I'm more likely to convert there because I already have a relationship, but I don't have that lingering question. And here, that lingering frustration, but I don't know if it's going to fit me comfortably. So it's easier to stay with a brand I know, or it's easier to convert with a brand that actually builds my confidence that it's going to fit me well. So what's the tool that you're using to build that confidence? Product preferences, not shocking here. Breathability rises to the top in underwear. Soft feel rises to the top in socks. Neutral colors are very common for both, and cotton are the most preferred material preference across apparel basics categories. I will say, What's important to note here is that while neutral colors are commonly converted on, they do not catch the eye in the same way that bright, bold patterns do. Especially for trend and style forward segments, catching their eye is critical. So while they may end up converting on the black pair of underwear, you can lead with the bold, bright colors, the seasonal trends, the limited edition patterns, etc., to capture their attention, bring them into your ecosystem, get them to click on your advertisement, and then convert them, even if they are going to end up at a white sock or a black pair of underwear, for example. Okay, key takeaway 2 from our shopper journey, Hanes is differentiated around comfort, durability, and being a good value, and that connects to the articulated key considerations that consumers have while shopping, what they're looking for from brands in the space to deliver. So the brand is serving the majority of consumers' underlying needs and key consideration factors. But there are innovation opportunities, right? We're going to talk about that in this next section. So where are growth opportunities for the brand? We dug into one dynamic specifically that was really interesting to bring to life, and that's around willingness to pay. We're going to take underwear as an example of this. 2 out of 3 consumers report a willingness to pay between $10 and $24 for a pair. Let me say that again. 2 out of 3 consumers are saying, I'm willing to pay $10 to $24 for a pair of underwear. Hanes does not offer products at that unit price. Now, there's reasons for this, of course. There's a dynamic at which that pulls Hanes towards offering multi-packs, which we're going to dig into. That's been incredibly successful. But there's an opportunity here that emerges clearly. And in retrospect, looking through the rearview mirror, this helps explain where a lot of disruptive competitors have established themselves and stolen market share away from Hanes. Cultural canaries and innovators are the 2 life lenses most willing to pay $25 or more. So once again, cultural canaries, I'm style trend forward. So therefore, I'm willing to pay money to stay on the cutting edge. Innovators also want to stay on the cutting edge, but for a different reason, because they care about being people who are adopting new technologies, who are always on the lookout for what's next. Okay, last piece here, practical minimalists, most willing to spend less than $10 for a pair of underwear. That makes a ton of sense. They love their multi-packs. Don't take them away. Don't change them. Give them a great value at the unit price that feels great for them. Let's dig into this Hanes dynamic a little bit more. So on the left here, we've just clumped those same willingness to pay numbers. 41% of consumers say I'd be willing to pay under $15 for a pair of underwear. About 1 out of 2 say $15 to $24, and then 10% say that $25 or more. We went through Hanes' brand website and looked at men's underwear. We looked at unit prices, and even in their multi-packs, and at a unit price level, 96% of Hanes men's underwear has less than $15 as a unit price. In fact, the average unit price was $6.61. So if I'm a shopper who says I'm willing to pay $10 for a pair of underwear or $15 for a pair of underwear, a unit price of $6 is incredibly attractive to me. I walk away feeling like I got a great deal. And in today's world, that's an incredibly powerful thing where everything seems to be inflating in terms of price and getting more expensive while I'm feeling squeezed. Hanes can build a massive amount of brand resonance, consideration, and love because of its great value. This in no means should be something that Hanes abandons or ditches. We strongly recommend that Hanes continues to provide outsized value through its multi-packs and ensure that its brand identity is around those key category table stakes. If I, as a shopper, can walk away saying, I bought Hanes underwear, it's comfortable, it lasts a long time, and it was a great price, that is a win for Hanes. And that is what's led to the brand's staying power in the category. However, there is an additional opportunity for the brand to incrementally increase product lines that are at a premium price point. Does not mean replace old product lines or increase prices for all product lines, but rather bring to market new product lines that are incrementally more expensive, but deliver incrementally more value. With new branded technologies, Hanes can say, we built a product that helps you stay cooler in any temperature, and therefore we're going to charge you slightly more because what you get is worth what you give. Now, Hanes has started doing this. However, the brand has gone at a much higher price point. So it introduced the Perfect Flex Boxer, which is one for $28. So the unit price there is $28. That is a massive jump from the average of a Hanes multi-pack today, that's $6 average unit price, to $28. That's 4x the price there. While the brand has seen some signals in terms of positive consumer reviews on that product, that can provoke dissonance. If I'm used to seeing a certain price point or a certain offering from a brand, and then I see something dramatically different, that can lead to dissonance. What we recommend doing is actually incrementally adding value through product features and technologies and new lines, and incrementally adding on to those more premium tiers. So, some examples of what that could look like. You can imagine keeping the traditional multi-packs that serves minimalists, tradition keepers, stability seekers incredibly well, providing that outsized value. We can then also imagine leaning into feeling comfortable in any temperature and ensure I can move my body without restriction. It really resonates with our more performance-focused audiences like the innovators and ambitious achievers. Two groups that are willing to spend more in this space and have performance and achievement-oriented goals in terms of who they are. So you can imagine moving more into that $20 unit price range, maybe even upper teens in terms of the price range there. You're stretching into that space, but you're providing additional features to reinforce that it is worth it. You could also imagine leaning into aesthetics and colors and designs, doing a bright and bold line. It's not your core product line, but it is something for consumers that will catch their attention, and that style-focused segments like our image architects and our cultural canaries might say, oh, Hanes, that's cool. That's interesting. I didn't expect that from you, but I'm already considering you as a brand. Now I might buy that. That could be something built for someone like me. That internal narrative you can imagine resonating. When going after these three audience segments, here's some other information worth knowing. So, first, that practically minded consumer segment, as we mentioned, these three life lenses, they make up roughly 75 million consumers in America. Now, they're not willing to spend a lot. They actually are looking for more of that budget tier of price point. They're more likely to shop at Walmart compared to other segments. And the competitors that Hanes are up against are brands like Jockey and Fruit of the Loom. For our innovation-focused consumers, our innovators and our ambitious achievers who care about performance and being up to speed with what's next, they make up roughly 45 million American consumers. And they're willing to spend more. They're over-indexed and shopping at places like Amazon for underwear or Dick's Sporting Goods. And the brands that Hanes is competing with are brands like Nike and Calvin Klein and Ralph Lauren. And then we have our style-focused consumers. These are our cultural canaries and our image architects. Now, they make up only a smaller audience, but about 33 million Americans. And because they're willing to spend more on each and every pair of underwear they buy, and they also tend to shop more often, they actually make up an outsized impact on category spend. So they're an attractive consumer segment. Even though there's fewer people, their dollars go further within the category. They're more likely to shop at places like Shein and Nordstrom and Target, and the brand is up against a wide variety of style-focused brands. So Calvin Klein lands here as well, Lululemon, Victoria's Secret, Aerie, and Nike are some that fit here. Okay. The bottom line here is this. Hanes is the clear leader in the apparel basics category. It delivers today on key attributes like comfort, durability, and value. However, future growth may come from extending beyond the category table stakes and broadening the portfolio by incrementally moving into premium, technology-led, style-forward products that keep considering audiences engaged with a brand instead of them fleeing to competitors. That was a lot to walk through. We have a ton more to say about this category, the brand performance, and other thoughts. But I hope that gives a good overview of what a landscape's output can look like and feel like. This is exactly what you can expect if you said, yeah, I want to tap into landscapes and I need some partnership from Langston to help answer these core business questions. Of course, anything we would build is built upon and customized to the questions that you have and are bringing to the table. But we have a massive amount of consumer data already on tap so that we can turn around a report like this in 1 week. Thank you for the time today, and please reach out if you have any questions.